diving. Hope comes and stops us in our tracks. Bravely we prove in our striving, trudging together each day. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Raw Recovery with Dion Miller. It is Friday, and today's edition features Doreen. Doreen was brought to us through our promoter, Jill. Doreen and Jill were in C-Car class together last January. Most currently, Doreen is a peer support. She does peer support through NAMI, helping run those groups and the peer groups. But the reason that we have Doreen on today is to bring us alcoholics or addicts another side to this. So Doreen herself is not an addict, but that doesn't mean she's not in recovery, guys. Okay, anybody can be in recovery. All right, it's just depend on recovery from what. So her focus really here today is to focus on what happens with the family and things like that. So we're going to get a little bit of a different perspective. Doreen, thank you for coming on the show today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Certainly. So let's get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, I have two boys.
Okay.
They're currently 18 and 21.
All right.
And as you said, I'm not the one in substance abuse recovery. I certainly am in recovery alongside them.
Way to put it. Good job.
And I guess, a little bit about me that I think will become important as we talk. I grew up in a small family business, very high stress, high expectations, youngest sister by 9 years.
Okay. Wow.
And became an engineer when I wanted to be an artist. So, lots of hidden traumas in my life.
Okay. Sounds like some control. Your parents want you to be a certain way.
Yeah.
And so they were on you. They wanted you to be the engineer or the doctor or whatever, not the artist.
Yep. So I passed that along, unfortunately, to my boys. I had been super high stress, went to school, got a job, didn't really do much, met my husband at work because I didn't socialize. And we had a whirlwind relationship. He was the light of my life. He actually got me out having fun. We were married within a year and a half. And then less than a year later, had our first child.
Okay.
And I was a crazy overprotective mom, like to the point that when I was outside and I saw hawks circling, I ran inside with my baby.
I did that stuff. People always told me, they're like, you were way too protective of your kids. And I was always like, piss off.
Yeah.
but I wasn't understanding what they were saying. Go ahead. So it's kind of neat how both of us were, because my household was a very non-controlling. It was a do whatever you want house. So it's kind of weird how happened.
We both wound up in the same place, right? Yeah. In the different ways.
Yeah. I mean, so go ahead. I just thought that was neat. So very protective mommy.
Yeah. And what I didn't know, and we didn't find out until after we nearly lost my oldest, is we're both on the autism spectrum. We both have Asperger's.
Okay. So you found out a little bit later in life, and it's Asperger's? Okay.
Yeah.
And you've been diagnosed with that?
We've both been diagnosed.
Okay.
So that came, though, like I said, after all of the substance abuse and nearly losing him. And it really, I think it saved his life. I think it saved my life.
Wow.
To know, because
Yeah.
at 19, he finally realized why he was so different. And I
Yeah.
finally realized why I was not just controlling. I worked a lot. My addiction was my work. I worked in corporate. I traveled a
Okay.
lot. I was super proud of all of that and thinking I was providing for my family,
Yeah.
which I was, but I wasn't. It, in some ironic way, I was the absolute opposite of what I wanted to be for my boys. I wanted to
Okay.
be the best mom ever, which to me meant providing for them. I
Okay.
didn't know how to, hug them enough and love them enough and listen more than I talked.
Okay.
And, you know, so and I think that's an important part of our story, because I know a lot of programs teach, you didn't cause it. And I say, I
Yeah.
totally did.
Yeah. I don't agree with that either.
I totally
Mm-mm.
did. I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
And,
Well, how are we
my
going to
boys,
take responsibility for our actions if we don't admit that? Now, I'll tell people that, it isn't your fault that you're an alcoholic, but you're still going to take responsibility for your actions.
100%.
Oh,
And then I think that's helped us heal.
yeah.
I've had hour to 2 hour long conversations with my oldest about his recovery,
Okay.
about how he got started. We did, I think one of the most interesting things that I've learned from him, I was fresh out of peer recovery coaching. And
Okay.
as we were talking, he said, "What is addiction?" And of course, I started going to the definition, right? Because it's what I
Let me.
do.
Well,
And
SUD.
yeah, and he stopped me. He said, "It was instant for me."
Hmm.
He said, he had dabbled, he had tried marijuana, he had been
Okay.
using chewless tobacco,
Yeah.
alcohol, all that stuff. But he said, the first time I had a Percocet pill, he was like, I was instantly, said I was ready to give half of everything I owned for another one.
Wow.
So, that I think is important for parents to understand too, that like we always say, no one chooses to
Yeah.
be an addict, right?
Hmm.
But he had so much pain, he felt so different. And
Yeah.
the moment that he didn't feel that pain, he was like, oh my God, I need to feel that again.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Who wouldn't? Well,
Yeah.
maybe other people wouldn't, but I mean, heck, he found relief after what, 19 years? That's a lot.
It was about 17 and a half years when he
Yeah.
had started. So
That's a
he went from,
long time to feel lonely.
it's a really long time. And the other irony, so a couple of things. He didn't have his first drink till he was 17.
Okay.
But then it was like the floodgates opened, and then it
Hmm.
wasn't long after that he had tried the pills. And his ultimately, it turned out to be Xanax that really was
Okay.
his drug of choice.
All right.
And I didn't know. He when he graduated from high school, which I always took for granted too, as something that would
Hmm.
happen, and when it nearly didn't, that was kind of the beginning of my awakening
Okay.
as a parent,
Sure.
of like, okay, this isn't something you can take for granted. This kid might actually not, he's
Yeah.
brilliant and he might actually not graduate.
Yeah.
Holy shit, what am I going to do?
And
So that was kind of the
in
beginning of the
your world,
crazy.
that's the end of the world, man.
It
It
was, it
that's a
was.
huge thing in your world.
And
Well,
that's
education is important to you. So,
it was everything. When
mhm.
it was just, there were assumptions he was going to do that, or, and then when he graduated, he was either going into the military or he was going to college. But
Mhm.
again, not knowing that he had Asperger's, neither one of those things was his right path. And
Mhm.
so that was a huge awakening for me. And it didn't like, that was the beginning of it, but I definitely wasn't there. He graduated. he started really declining, because now what, right? At least he could drag himself to school and be
Yeah, now he
late, leave
doesn't.
early, and he had
Yeah, he doesn't have.
something.
He's not accountable to anything.
Yeah, but
Uh-oh.
he's very mechanically inclined. So
Okay.
on
Not
his 18th
surprising.
birthday, not surprising, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of
Um,
people with Asperger's are very, very technically inclined
yes, yeah,
because they
and
just have that. They can work that in their head quickly
that's what
on
he said. He
how
thinks
this
in
works.
puzzles.
Yeah, he can see it in his head. Cool
Yeah,
stuff. I think that's neat.
it is. It's fascinating. I wish more people could appreciate it, honestly.
Man.
But on his 18th birthday, he went to a motorcycle shop. He had been riding motorcycles since he was 5.
Okay.
He loved them.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to be a mechanic. I remember I came home from work that day. There were a couple of kids I didn't recognize in our home. I walked into his bedroom. I saw the application on his nightstand, and he was high. And it was the
Mm-hmm.
first time I'd seen him high in our house. And I lost it. And
Okay.
and again, I think those are things important for parents to hear, because it was the absolute wrong thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I should have seen, I should, and I say should have, but I was not, I didn't have the capacity to, right?
Yeah,
And
at
have
that
the
time. Mm-hmm.
understanding. But if I could have known, I would have been like, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong? And how come you can't, how are you feeling? Because truly, I think he felt like, now what? I've been waiting to turn 18 to go be a mechanic, and I can't be a mechanic because this job application requires a drug test, and I know I'm going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And so that hopelessness, just
Yeah. Now he's probably feeling pretty stuck.
totally stuck. So the drug use increased. I think the other thing with Asperger's, we tend to have very intense personalities, right? Which goes very well, or very poorly, however you want to look at it, with
Yeah.
addiction.
Yeah.
So,
Depending on the road they're on at the moment. Absolutely.
yeah, and so he continued on. So that was the beginning of June. By the beginning of July, this 2017, we gave him an ultimatum.
Okay.
He had a younger brother, and we were like, dude, you can't live here if you're
Mm-hmm.
going to keep on with this. We were scared, and we tried the tough love thing. We sent him away,
Yeah.
and worst thing we could have done. But again, lessons learned, right? He said when we sent him away, he felt like he literally had nothing left.
Yep.
He was garbage. No one believed in him.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing he did was he bought a crappy car that literally had the transmission zip tied in by some jerk.
And left.
And drove to Tallahassee,
Wow.
sunglasses on, middle of the night, sunglasses on, smoking weed with some kid that
They barely knew.
he knew, that told him he had something in the trunk. He never knew what.
Okay.
Turns out it was a pretty big, heavy bag. They never got stopped. But that could have been a felony,
Yeah.
So here, my what I thought his whole life growing up, my perfect little angel Eagle Scout,
Mm-hmm.
he would have been facing a felony charge. So by the grace of God, he didn't.
Yeah.
I thought I sent him away to be with a friend of the family, so that I knew where he was going. I filled his car with groceries, gift cards. He burned through it all in a week, and then he was back. And at the time, I said like a boomerang. I was so angry. It's like, why is this kid coming back? But again, I look back and I'm thinking, well, thank goodness he did, because he could have been, and then we were going to counseling. My husband and I independently were going to counseling. And I remember he came home one night, and he sat on the couch, said, I need to talk to you about what the therapist said. And
Mm-hmm.
he started, and he said that the guy said, we need to write a contract, give him 10 days to change.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't, put him out. And he said, put him out means his stuff on the curb, and the police come forcibly remove him. And I again freaked. That was my go-to, right?
Yeah.
I freaked about everything because I couldn't handle, and that's due to my condition, right? I don't handle unexpected things or change or anything that scares me well.
Okay.
And I said, no way. He's our baby. He'll be dead in a gutter if we do that. Like we had one chance to send him away and have him come back. I'm not doing it.
And look what happened there. Sure. So you're basing things off of what you're already seeing. All right.
Yep.
And sometimes tough love doesn't quite work out the way we want it to. Because
no, it's horrible.
Well, the problem now is everybody knows about tough love. So it's not like it's a secret. It's like they already know what you're doing. You know.
Right.
Now, when I was growing up, my mom used tough love on me, and it kind of worked. But that was, but I didn't know what the end result was, so I couldn't change. I couldn't manipulate that. But now that we know it, we can manipulate that. Everybody knows what tough love is.
Yeah.
It's like there's no secret behind the 4-step anymore.
Yep.
Which is literally why bunches of people don't do it, because now they don't understand. So, yes, this is just a process. And what your therapist is saying is true in a lot of circumstances. But let's continue on. I'd like to hear what happened.
So that was not an option. We didn't do that. We did what we could to control our risk. So we had a tracker in the car that he used. At one point, I took all the extra keys, everything I had, I threw it in the safe. We had guns. They were in a safe, but I took them out. I gave them to family members so that there was no possibility. Because he had grown up, knowing how to use them too, and that scared me. I didn't want to have anything to do with that. And again, like, not because I'm against guns, but because he was clearly not in a right state of mind.
Well, trust level, you can't trust the addiction at all.
Yep.
So, great move.
And then so that was June to July, and then November I was super excited because he taught to a personal training school, agreed to go.
Cool.
He started that January of 2018.
Okay.
It was supposed to be a 4-month program. I think I end up paying extra. Like, there's a lot of I paid, right?
Yeah.
and that's another thing. People will say don't enable them, but I don't. Even in retrospect, I don't think I was enabling anything. I think I was keeping him alive while he was struggling.
Well, it's not like you were handing him cash.
Yeah,
every
day.
You were paying for something and you paid them directly. He couldn't get a hold of you were trying to keep him accountable, and I actually agree with what you were doing.
Yeah. So, it took longer. I guess what I should have said before that is he did end up with a DUI charge before that, before he started school.
Okay.
He hired a lawyer. But something interesting that he said when he called, we had ironically taken an Uber to a party, and my husband and I were both drinking. He called us from jail. Yeah. I didn't know, but it had been 8 hours already before they let him call us.
Yeah.
And I said, and I just learned this like a month ago. He said, "Do you remember what you said to me?" I said, "No." He said, "You asked me what happens if I don't pay and don't come."
Mm-hmm.
And hung up the phone.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, what a bitch. Right?
Yeah.
But I was hurting, right? I was scared. And I was like, when is this going to end? But here's the thing about that, right? I felt so good about myself and what I said, right? Again, that tough parent.
Yeah,
right?
you put down that boundary
And what he said, but because what I did do is pay it instantly and jump in the car and get up there. But what I didn't know, he said, when they put him in a cell with other people, he found the biggest, scariest guy he could find and started to pick a fight. He said, I wanted to die.
Yeah.
I wanted the guy to take me out. I was done. And so again, I think the theme is I was hurting and I projected my pain and my trauma onto my children. I do believe it led to a portion of his pain and trauma in addition to what he would have had anyway.
Okay.
And then
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair of you to say.
Yeah. And when he was visibly struggling, I still didn't have enough education or knowledge in how to deal with it. And I continued to do that, which, I think that's risky business, right?
It can be, it's tough. I have a daughter that has trouble. And I told her, hey, I know you're doing it, but don't block me off. I'm not going to give you a hard time. I'm not. Hey, I want to be there for you. She has, 2 kids and, but that enables her for when something happens, who does she call? She calls me.
Yeah.
Or she calls my wife. Because we kept that relationship open. That way, when something happened, and it did, we were able to be there. And she would be able to call us without having to feel shame.
And I think that's so important. And that's something he said that, the way he described his addiction and his feelings, he said, I was hopeless. And he said, I felt like, one day I was walking my dog. He said, the next day I looked down, I had a mountain lion on the end of a dog leash. It's a very different scenario.
Yeah.
But it happens that fast. And he said, and I couldn't tell you because every time I tried to tell you something, he said, I'd look in your eyes and I would see that you couldn't handle it.
Yeah. And he didn't want to, he was tired of hurting his mother. Trust me, I know that one.
Yeah. Which is hard, so the person he's supposed to be able to go to and I, shut that path down. And, that's something that I try and encourage parents all the time. And like you said, Dion, you have to keep those pathways open, even if it's painful. You set boundaries and you're their parents, we made this choice.
Yeah.
My husband and I joke about that. Like when we were back in the day, when we were having fun, making a baby, we weren't thinking about all this.
Yeah. We weren't thinking jail time. We weren't, you weren't putting aside bail money now. You're putting away for college, not.
Yeah. And so he was on, the reason I bring that up is because, he was on probation. He signed the paperwork every month. I kept track of all that. And again, I still didn't know about his Asperger's condition, but I did know that he wasn't a paperwork guy. Like I was making all that happen. I was making sure that he was on time for everything. And he had to volunteer at Goodwill. And I think most people look at that and they're like, yeah, volunteer time, whatever, 75 hours, no big deal. He couldn't do it.
Yeah.
He couldn't go for more than 2 hours to be in that environment. To like, I think he's very empathetic too. I think he was literally feeling all the energy, even of people's old stuff and things they got rid of. And we paid to reduce the hours he did by 50%. And then I begged him like towards the end of the term. I'm like, dude, come on. And I remember one day he was laying in bed and he said, something about like, he's not going to be able to complete it. I'm going to die in jail. Like he was giving up. And that was so terrifying.
Yeah.
What could I do? Except chase him down, try and find him, get him through, and somehow he made it through. He did his time. But here's the thing, Dion, in the midst of all that, he's going to school for personal training. He's loving it. He's and this is how blind I was and how I think we explain things to ourselves that we see, right?
Okay.
Because he was working out every day. He was coming home excited, talking about the things he learned, getting really ripped, and like he's 16, and I don't know. I never touched an illegal drug in my life. I hardly took an aspirin, right? So I no context. And I was like, oh wow, good genes. I was a bike racer. Look at this kid go. He got super aggressive, and then he wasn't getting out of bed in the morning, right? And so I changed my work schedule. So, in retrospect, what was going on? He was doing a round of roids. He was taking Xanax every night. And so like every morning I was at risk of him not waking up, and I didn't know it.
You can't mix those two. That is bad.
Yeah.
That's
and
like that's like that's like taking a bunch of oxy or something with alcohol. It can be extremely dangerous. It shut down your heart. It'll bring your heart rate down so low it just stops.
Yeah, and I had no idea. He probably didn't know. The way I found out about the steroids was he had gone away to college, like well after, and I'll get to how we almost lost him, but well after that, he called one day. He's like, "There's a cup in my room. I need you to go grab it and throw it away."
Yeah.
He said, "That's full of needles."
Yeah.
It was a cup from a family vacation, so like they talk about where should families look, and look for hiding places. It was hiding in clear sight. It was just a tumbler with a screw on top, and
he was at a point where he didn't care if you found it or not.
No, because he just had no hope, and he just was. And he said that's a great point. He said, I was doing what I was doing. He said, if one day I didn't wake up, that was a bonus. That's how he felt. Which is so sad, again, for somebody who's had such talent, and so anyway, he finished school, and it was around June. And I remember, again, explaining stuff away to myself, thinking, well, he's just, big transition again. We're going to go through the same thing that we went through after high school, right? He's big change. He's depressed because of that. I wasn't putting it all together. I had also just taken mental health first aid training. So that's the 8-hour certification course. And I felt enlightened, right? Because again, think about education was important to me. Control was important. I was like, this is great. Every parent should take this course. Now I know how to help my child. And here's the thing, right? Like 3 weeks after that, we had a family wedding to go to. I had been telling him about it. We had been prepping, and he seemed excited, but he was hiding. He was terrified. He was, he didn't want to go. He didn't want to face the family. He was afraid someone was going to figure something out. And the flight to go there was on a Friday. And so Thursday evening, we're standing in front of the closet with my husband. He's going through, he's checking out clothes for my husband, telling him what to wear. He's a very sharp dress, like he loves clothes and dressing sharp. And he's like, you should wear this and you're going to look great, Dad. And then I mentioned the flight, and he said, well, that's not for 2 days. And I was like, no, it's tomorrow. He disappeared. Like I didn't know. I thought maybe he had to go to the bathroom or something. And I was like, where'd he go? He's just gone. And he came home about 2 a.m. And every night I would make his bed. I'd put the diffuser on with essential oils. I'd leave a light on, like I did his like Motel 6, just in case he came home. The dog would wait for him. And most nights when he came home, I'd go say goodnight. I'd get out of bed. So,
Okay.
Which means there were, it turned out being years. I really didn't sleep.
Yeah.
I slept with one eye open waiting for him. But anyway, so he came home and I let him sleep that whole next day. And then I finally went in and said, dude, come on, like you got to get up. We got to get to the airport.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm not going.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I begged him. And again, I think coercion was pretty big. Something I realized recently my parents did with me my whole life and got me to do what they wanted. And I was like, I'm begging you, just get on the plane. I'll send you both back early. Because they were great kids, right? I always trusted them to be together. We never had a party in our house. Nothing ever happened visibly in my, where I could see it. And so didn't mean nothing was happening.
Yeah, it just means you didn't see it.
So he agreed to that. My husband and I left for the airport. Before I threw everything he had: brown shoes, black vest, brown vest, white shirt, ties, bow ties. I was like, pick what you want. We'll buy whatever you need when we're there. Just come. And he showed up, dropped his brother off at the airport, and left. I didn't know he was severely depressed. And again, as one of those retrospectives, he said, you never left. You said this was the first time you were gone. So he turned around and had a party.
Yeah. You've been waiting years for this.
Yeah, 18.
Yeah. And he probably felt like he deserved it.
Or 19. Let's see. He was 19, I guess, at that point. Yep. So that was a Friday. The wedding was on a Saturday. Sunday, I kept to my word. I sent the youngest home.
Okay.
We stayed another couple of days to visit with family. And I remember Sunday night, we tried to call. We didn't get any answer. We were like, wow, they just must be busy. Monday night around 7 or 8 p.m., we finally got a call back from the youngest. Hey, how's it going? He's like, oh, good. I was just taking a nap. And totally, they covered everything up.
Sure.
That night around 2 a.m., and we're ready to, get set to go back that Tuesday morning. But about 2 a.m., I got a call from my oldest. Says, where are the dogs? I said, they're at the, they're at the kennel, or didn't you go get them? He said, no, I forgot. And I heard background noise. I was like, who's there? He said, oh, it's just the TV. There's girls running around in the background. I could hear them screaming and carrying on. But I remember I sat up straight in bed, 2 a.m., thinking, this is not good. Like, I don't know what's going on, but this is not good. Right. And I'm way too far away. I'm 1,200 miles away. I can't do shit. Right. So I get on the plane tomorrow. And what a helpless feeling, right? Because you just, so we got on the plane, flew back, talked to the boys again, had somebody drop the dogs off because the boys didn't go get them.
Okay.
And we got home. Nobody told us what had happened, but my oldest, like, he looked white as a ghost. He looked sick. And I remember telling my husband, like, just sit with him, watch a movie. Like, he's sad. He was in severe withdrawal from the Xanax. And who knows what else he had taken that night. He said that night the kids were throwing pills in his mouth from across the room.
Yeah. Wow.
I found a small baggie next to his bed, and to be honest with you, it's my guess is it was coke, and it's probably what helped him live, because
Yeah.
as screwed up as that is,
Yeah.
because his heart was clearly gonna. I don't know how he lived. And that's another thing that like if I had a wish list, I wish that we had Narcan in the house.
Yeah.
My parents, ironically, had gone to training. They lived out of state, but they had gone to training. They didn't know exactly what was going down, but
Wow.
they told me later they took it because of their grandkids.
Yeah.
They needed to know.
It's
So
actually very good knowledge to have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you just never know. You could be walking down the street and somebody could be, so I have Narcan all over.
Yeah.
Not for me, but yeah.
Yeah, for who knows. And so this is where, this is raw. So here it is.
Okay.
Whatever people believe, but my son says he remembers walking to his brother's room through the walls. Like, we're not talking getting out of bed,
Okay.
walking to his brother's room and waking him up so that he would come back and revive him. And he said, I remember standing there watching him bring me back.
Oh.
So here,
Wow.
my 16-year-old son now is, living through bringing back his 19-year-old brother.
Yeah, death.
Never told it. Like, this came out later. They never told us. They hid it just like they hid everything else from us.
Yeah.
And so they went through all that trauma, alone.
Alone. Yeah.
And the only thing we did know was, we figured they did clean up the house, or the youngest had cleaned up the house, but there's still a few signs. So we knew there had been a party. We saw the oldest keep checking his wallet. And so we said, do you owe somebody money? And he said, yes. And we paid it. I think it wasn't that much. It was $125, but that's the thing too. They'll kill you over that much. Right? And we learned,
they will.
About 2 weeks later, they almost did. So, because I don't even remember the conversation, but I started pressing on something, and the youngest had a moment when he flipped, and he said, you don't understand what it's like to have somebody bust into your house and put a gun in your mouth. I was like, no, you're right, I don't. But my 16-year-old son did. And, I think that's the thing too, is that, again, people look at all this, and you can think what you want. Like you said, addiction can make you do things that you wouldn't do when you're in your right head. And but they're not bad kids, right? And I think, though, when we try to protect our own children, we send that message about their friends, about kids in the community, about families, and that shame is just more damaging than people can know. Because the truth is, when those kids who are in our house finally realized that my oldest was probably dying, guess what they did? They left.
Yeah.
Nobody made a phone call. Nobody tried to help him.
No, they found out. Shit. They found out who their friends were that weekend.
Yeah. Yep. And
turns out Xanax is the only friend he got.
Exactly. And and that's, and I said, why would they do that? He was like, Mom, these kids were worried about their scholarships and going to school, and their parents. He said, what were their parents going to say? I was like, are you kidding me? Like, what? Their parents would rather have them let somebody die? And sadly, I think the truth is yes. And that's,
it's unfortunate, but yeah, and it's a hard one to swallow. But everybody protects their own, and that's Yeah.
So, that it's one of those, like, that happened, right? And, afterward, he spends a lot of time in our garage smoking weed. And while I was worried about that, he was like, Mom, just leave me alone, right? But he was going through his own recovery, and withdrawals, and so I let him be, was doing that, working on the car up till all hours of the night. But it was all, I think, that the impacts of getting down off that Xanax.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember calling for help, right? And I called our employee assistance program. And I said, I think my son needs help. Because again, I didn't know, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is all retrospect. I think my son needs help. He seems depressed. And I said, how can I get him to help? Like, what can I do? And this woman, no joke, said, have you tried withholding the Wi-Fi password?
Mm.
And I remember it, like, just kind of pulling the phone away from my head and looking up to the sky. And
Are you crazy?
and I said, we're well past Wi-Fi password.
Yeah.
And it was just, and then I just went and sobbed. I was like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And the funny thing too, I remember, like, I did so much pacing, like walking outside and talking to friends, and just saying, there needs to be somebody besides all these therapists and doctors, is like somebody who understands what I'm going through.
Yep.
And I didn't know about peer coaches, right? But that's what I was describing. I was like, these people shouldn't be allowed to get licensed unless they've had life experience, or they're paired up with somebody who has had life experience. And I remember that so
Absolutely.
clearly.
Yeah. They're not, I call that staying in your lane.
Yeah.
So, you have peer specialists, and they're good for their portion, and therapists are good for their portion. Everyday life, I'm going to be talking to my recovery coach or somebody, in the program, somebody that's done the work before,
Yeah.
not read it out of a text. Now, but there on the other side, when it came to my PTSD and my anxiety, I utilize a therapist. A peer coach can't help me with that unless
Yep.
they've been there before, which usually, it's when it comes to that, it's kind of individual.
Yeah.
So it's all about staying in your lane. So,
Yeah.
but
For
you are
sure.
absolutely right. The first people we should talk to are people that understand where we're coming from, that have
Yeah.
been there.
Yep. And it was just so hard. Anybody, it was like, that was the next big round of trying to go to therapists, and, just not getting anything useful. And that's why, even to this day, it's a very personal thing. But like you said, a therapist is good at helping you dredge things up that you maybe are not facing, right? Not
Yeah.
thinking about, need a way to
Or haven't
work
seen,
through.
a lot of trauma will actually block out instances, so that you can feel better, so when you go see a
Yeah.
therapist, these things start coming up. But if you have a good therapist, they give you the tools before that starts to happen.
Yeah. So, I continued the journey, trying to figure out how to help him. What do I do? And I started thinking, he loved scouting. When we lived up near the mountains, I was like, maybe he needs to go to the mountains, right? Like, so
Change
I
of
started,
scenery time.
yeah, just researching, like, maybe I can send them off to who knows where, right? Like, I was open to anything. And just thinking, just like maybe a couple weeks, maybe he would go on this hike or expedition, or something. And we just, I remember searching, like, days and weeks. And all of a sudden it struck me one day. I was like, I know he's probably not, like, looking to go to college or anything, but that is kind of the next step. Like, he needs some sort of interim step, like, out from home.
Yep.
And so my husband and I tell this story differently. We don't remember who came up with it.
Okay.
Maybe we both needed to feel like we did something good.
Yeah.
But we found this tiny little school out in Colorado, and I said, could you go with him? Go take a trip. Go visit. And my husband looked at me with this crazy look in his eyes because, like he was thinking the school was a good idea, but he didn't want to get on a plane with my son. They had been fighting, and the all that rage and everything that had come out with the steroids. So he was a scary dude.
All right.
And I said, please, I'm begging you, just go. And so they went, and my son took hundreds of pictures and just was like loving it. It was October. October in Colorado is such a beautiful time and it did happen to snow just a little. And he didn't want to get back on the plane. He didn't want to go home. He was like, I want to stay. So luckily, he did go back home. Crazy thing, it was when we had just had that terrible hurricane hit the Panhandle in Florida. So he had this plan to go back and do work there, tarping roofs, and he was supposed to make all sorts of money and pay us back. He was like, I want to pay you back for everything you've done. It was a terrible ride up. A lot of the gas stations were closed. It was very scary. He got there. Everybody in the house, the guys that were running the teams, just sat there and drank all day. Yelled at him, treated him crappy, gave him shitty food. They were grilling steaks and he was eating peanut butter and jelly. Working out on the roof for 10, 12 hours. And I remember he called me one night and he said, he was breaking down, he was crying, and he said, I'm waiting for my food. I'm outside an IHOP. And he said, the waitress, I can see her, and she's behind the counter shooting up heroin.
Oh.
So it was the trauma, right? He was reliving his own trauma.
Yeah.
Watching her and her pain. And and he said, and plus, the guys, he said, they sit there and they're drinking, but yeah, they're talking bad about people who have chose to use drugs. And of course they didn't know my son's history, and they're just running their mouths. But that people don't know, and people do run their mouths, right? And he just was hurting so much. He said, they're saying these bad things, and I said, come home, right? Like there's nothing. But I promised I'd pay my brother back. I'd pay you back. I'm like, just come home. Like, try and get some sleep tonight. Come home. And he did, But again, I think that's when I look at how did this affect me, and I look at my own recovery, what it did is completely change the lens that I look at my life and my family through. I didn't care about the money anymore. I wanted him to stay alive. I could hear that loss of hope again, and that terrified me. And I think that's the scary thing about recovery, especially for young people, is that sometimes it's harder for them to protect themselves from being triggered again. So when he went to school, it was so hard because then he was 2,000 miles away from us, and we have such a strong connection. I could tell, but what's funny is he went, and when he met with the instructors, they were like, what do you want to get out of school? And he was playing the game. He's still playing the game, what's your 5-year, 10-year plan? And we walked out of the office, and I said, listen, what is your plan? And he said, my plan is want to wake up in the morning. And I was like, that's a good plan. So let's cancel the English class at 2 p.m. on a Friday, because I know you're not going.
Yeah, you ain't gonna make that.
And I said, and I know you don't care about it. And like, just go. So he took a couple of classes. He took like snow grooming classes and terrain
Yeah.
park building. And I
Okay.
was like, just go have fun. He did that, and he was a snowmobile guide. Never rode a snowmobile in his life, but he had ridden motorcycles and dirt bikes
Yeah.
and all that. So he went for one tour. He paid for one tour, and then he went and applied for the job. And they asked him about his experience. He talked his way in, and there he went.
Yeah.
And but again, like you said, that mechanical mindedness and thinking, he transferred everything he knew from a dirt bike to a snowmobile. And
Yeah.
he worked part-time. He went to school part-time. And the other thing that you see is like how much everybody in our society tries to coerce you into things, because even the school, they're like, oh, if you're a full-time student, then you're eligible, we'll reimburse you for your ski pass for the year. So that control.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't want it. And I said, it's fine, don't worry about it. But again, I think before all this happened, I would have been like, oh, come on, you should, like, that's a good perk. And
Yeah.
like look at the crazy things we do over what, like 600, 700
Yeah.
like,
It's just money.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like, maybe you just don't ski this year. Like, you got something in your backyard. Like there's so many other options. But that's not the way that I had been raised, or that he had been. And but I see how damaging that can be to our choices, and makes us choose things that are not aligned with who we are and why we're here.
Absolutely.
So here, fast forward, he went to school for one semester.
Okay.
And he achieved his goal, which was make connections and get a job. And so he fixed stuff that his instructors couldn't fix.
Wow.
They referred him before he went to the classes for the actual mechanical stuff.
Yeah, well, gosh, he's got to be feeling pretty good about that.
He was. And and it's funny, to this day, I don't even know what his grades were. I never saw any documentation. I never asked. I don't care. Like, because it's funny, he, like, welding, we talked about, and I said, maybe you should go back so you can have your teacher turn something in for the certification. He's like, I don't want to go back because I'd have to go to every class to pass. And all of a sudden I had this moment where I was like, did he not pass the first one? And he probably didn't, but you know what? He welded better than anybody in that class. So
yeah. I believe, I'm a person that I believe in life experience, and that you can apply those things. What I'm kind of seeing is he's going through this. We have hope going, and then it kind of goes down, and then we have some hope, and then it goes down, and we have some hope, but each time it seems to be going up more and down less, up more and then down a little bit less. So we're seeing a good progression here on recovery, on somebody trying to find recovery. So
yeah. And I think that's an important point, right? We say it's not linear, and it's not. And he shared too. He said, I had a moment, and he said, it's taken me so long to tell somebody this, but he said, I was at a party, so this point is probably like a year and a half in. And he said some kid had some Coke. He left a line for me in the bathroom. He said, I went and looked at it, and he said, and I scoffed at it thinking this is a joke, right? Like, this is hardly anything, not enough. He said, so I took it, and he said, instantly, again, my brain was just wanted more. He said, I scraped the bag, I licked the card, I scraped the bag lid, I went searching for, like, and he said, I had no control over
Mhm.
what I did like that evening. And he said, I woke up the next day so ashamed. He said, that kid didn't have a problem with, he was like, quote, just having fun, right?
Mhm.
And like, but he said, I know now I can't touch that.
Yeah.
I learned, and but again, I think that's, so a couple things there, right? I think having those instances, it can happen, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but people have to learn from it to help them
Mhm.
stay in their recovery. The fact that it happened so long before he told me, is scary too, right?
Mhm.
And makes me think that that's another value that a coach can bring, particularly to a young person and their families,
Yeah.
is to point that out and say, listen, this is a risk, and everybody's different, right? Some people can
Mhm.
never touch any substance again. Some people can never touch certain substances again.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes you don't know unless you try it. And I don't
That
recommend
is
it,
the
because
that
that could have been
uh,
the start of a bender, and
exactly. Yeah. No. So I am presuming at this point that your son is in recovery.
he is. It's been what, almost 2.5 years.
Wow.
Um, so with, like I said, that was an example of, like, he was tested within that, but I
Yeah,
don't restart the
certainly.
clock. Right?
Well, I think it'd be pretty hard to diagnose that unless he was actually off of everything. So
Mhm.
a lot of things you can't be diagnosed with until you're off of drugs and alcohol for 6 months.
Mhm.
So, because they look so much alike that they can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of similarities here. Um, I'm listening and I'm like, it's kind I didn't listen to my story, but I don't know that I would have gotten on that plane either. Um, I love people, but I love Zoom because I can do
Mhm.
it from the comfort of sometimes I'll go out, and if I haven't taken care of myself, done what I need to do, and I'm in a group of people and there's a large amount of over emotion, I gotta go
Mhm. Yeah.
because it's too much. Even if it's good stuff, I gotta
Yeah.
go. It's a trigger for me.
Mhm.
But as I've gotten older and been to the therapist and now I recognize my triggers. I know what they are, and I don't
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
it's kind of, I'm not saying I don't get triggered, but now my
Mhm.
mind, instead of just quick, because
Mhm.
when you're in those situations, I know how he feels, man. I
Yeah.
know how he feels when you're just like, death is better than this.
Yeah.
It is so much better than this. I would rather be dead. God, and I've had this prayer before, just kill me. Would you
Yeah.
would you just end me, please? I don't want to do this anymore. And obviously his answer was no.
Yeah. Exactly. It was a resounding no, and yeah, and he's fun. And still, sometimes, he looks at the world and he's like, our world is so screwed up. He's like, I don't know why I'm here. And I said, well, I don't know, but
Grace of
clearly
God.
somebody has plans for you too, because you
Well,
just,
I would have to say there are probably other people in recovery with Asperger's. He's
mm-hmm.
got he's got plenty of work that he can do in the program.
Yeah.
So,
And
so
the interesting thing too, what you reminded me of is, about a year into his recovery, I fell apart. I never thought about it, never saw it coming, and just, and you would think, I think I would have thought as a parent that the worst time is when you're going through the actual trauma, right? All the the risk of jail and prison and fines and whatever, and finding your kids. But it was actually after I felt like he was better that I completely crumbled. That was when the guilt and the grief struck me, and
But
realizing
you didn't have a chance before. It was the same situation when you left town and he stayed home. Right?
mhm,
But now it was your turn. It was your body saying, okay, we're done. We have a chance. We're getting rid of this stuff. We're getting rid of all this bad crap. We got a chance to do it.
yep.
Um,
And I remember thinking, like now I know why he chose to do what he did, because I was feeling that pain and I wanted it to go away. And I
yeah.
remember going, just breaking down, and it was the youngest again. I mean, he deserves a statue built for him. He's been through so much. But I remember him looking me in the eye one day and saying, "You're not okay."
Yeah.
He was like, "Mom, you have been our rock." And he's like, "I'm telling you, you're not that person anymore."
You
And,
don't have to be.
he's like, "You need help." And I remember saying, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine." I had been going, I had amped up my therapy. And I remember it the next day I went to work, I went to a meeting, and I just lost it. I was in a conference room, there was glass walls, and I just fell apart. And then I put myself on mute and was just falling apart. And a colleague stopped, said, "Are you okay?" And I said, I don't think so.
I don't think so. No. Yeah.
And what he said though, he said, "Well, I have to get to a call, but if you're around at 11, if you want to have lunch or coffee or something, let me know."
Yeah.
I was not in a place where that should have happened, right?
Yeah.
Like, luckily I went down, and we had a nurse on site. I went and got myself help. But that really stood out too, because again, people not understanding the signs when
Yeah.
someone's in trouble. I was in serious trouble.
Yeah. Well, and now that you've educated yourself, now you understand. Now you're like, okay, wow, how did I make it through that? It's like, and we can see it in other people now,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, which is kind of with what you're trying to do. You're trying to work to a place where you can help as a peer specialist, uh, family members that are suffering from this, right? Isn't that
Yeah.
kind of what your goal is here?
Yeah, I wanna help families, just be able to work through things and understand that they're not alone. And like you said before, I don't believe I'm not the type that's going to let somebody off the hook. Right?
Yeah.
I think that it's important that family members take responsibility for
Absolutely.
any portion, intentionally or unintentionally, that they
Mm-hmm.
could have had to do with their loved ones' substance abuse. But I think, if you were a help in causing it, you can be a help in supporting them in their
Abs-
recovery.
Absolutely. That's a great way, that's a good perspective. Because I tell a lot of alcoholics, and I say this all the time: for as far as you've gone down, you can go up. So the
Mm-hmm.
further you went down, the more you can go up, man. So congratulations. And it's the same thing here. I mean, it's just about taking responsibility for our actions. And when we do that, it frees us to be of more help to other people, whether that person be the alcoholic or the person affected by the alcoholic. It's a family disease, and it should be a family recovery.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, for me, the important part of our story too is that I had no idea that I had an addictive personality. And we kind of let the kids know, like, hey, yeah, like as I look back, I'm like, wow, we did actually have quite a bit of substance abuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
in
Now
our
that you look
family,
back, you're like,
as
ooh.
many of us do, right? But denial is not just a river in Egypt,
That's
right?
right.
It ran pretty deep with
Hmm.
me and my family, and and I remember them growing up saying never quit, and
Yeah.
I always said that, but you know, it's my son who told me, Mom, you never quit anything you were winning
Aha.
at. I was like, oh,
No, I
Jason.
get that because my wife and I were together for a little bit. She's like, God, yeah, you're just good at everything. I said, no, I only do stuff I'm good at. I don't
Yeah.
do the other stuff. So now she knows me a lot better. Yeah. So, but
Yeah, we
yeah,
just hide that well.
that's a personality. That's a strong personality trait. So, well, thank you very much for coming on and taking your time with us today. Uh, it just kind of goes to show that everybody kind of needs somebody else. I mean, I'm a recovery coach and a personality, but I have a therapist. I have people that help me out. I don't want you get to a place where you don't want to do it alone anymore.
Yeah.
Where the bright spot of our lives is helping other people become better people every day. You know,
Yeah,
once you take
exactly.
away and once you take away the alcohol and the drugs, we're all pretty much the same.
Yes.
Because I could
Yep,
relate to a
that's
lot.
true.
Yeah, well, as a parent, as an alcoholic, I didn't relate as much, but as a parent of children that have problems, I relate a lot. Um,
Yeah.
and you never know what's going to happen. So great job. I have to say, great job on sticking it through, but not so much that because he had to fall himself and you let him do that. And that was hard while maintaining a relationship with him. Fantastic. Great job. I'm going to give him a round of applause on that one. Okay. Because I think men need that. We do. If we're going to make any changes, because we men have some changes that we need to make when it comes to emotions and expressing our feelings, and understanding that it's not a weakness.
Yeah.
And if you do think it's a weakness, go ahead, give me a call. It's not a problem. We'll have a talk. And I'm gonna make you cry. No. So it goes to show that, as long as if we are open-minded and willing, we can get information. We can understand where other people are coming from. And what happens is there's this transition in recovery. We go from having sympathy to having empathy. And it's a big difference, especially when you're codependent. I'm a double dipper too. I'm a coda. So yeah, that knowing the difference between that can really make a big change. So
It totally transformed my life, and I really wouldn't have it any other way. I feel like it is helping us to do what we need to do to break that chain of trauma, repeat trauma in our family,
generational trauma. Yep. That's it. I know a lot of people doing that in this next generation. Better be nicer to us. We're helping you guys. Hey, I do that with my son. Yeah. If he is angry, I let him do it.
Yeah.
Well, why not? Everybody gets angry. I didn't take no offense. Well, before we sign off here, was there anything else you wanted to say, Doreen? Double check the notes.
Yeah. I don't think so. I mean, there's so much, like you said, so much happened in such a short period of time. But I really think the key, Dion, is, don't shut them out. Right.
Yeah.
And because, there is one thing, and this kind of highlights that. My son didn't go, and again, everybody's path is different and their needs.
Yeah.
He did not go to a recovery center.
Okay.
My youngest struggled, that's a whole other story, as a wrestler and with anorexia, but
Mm-hmm.
he too did not go to a recovery center. We did it on our own.
Yeah. Yeah, I support
And
all ways of recovery.
yeah, and the reason I bring that up though is because I think it's personalities, right? So my oldest said,
Yep.
if you had, as much as we had all been through and as much trauma as was there, right? Some at my hand, he said, you were still, to me, my husband, he said, you were still two of the smartest people I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and if you would have sent me away, I would have felt hopeless, because if you didn't know what to do with me, how was
Then
somebody
who?
else going to know?
That's
And
how I.
again,
That's
I'm
yeah.
not saying some people need it. Some people need the structure and the rigor, of a recovery program, center.
Mm-hmm.
But for
No.
him, he didn't need it. And I think that's most important is
Some.
that.
You know, it's some people just straighten out. My son did the same thing.
Mm.
He didn't go into any kind of treatment. He has more time than I do. You know? He has 5.5 years. You know,
Wow,
just
great.
just had a little baby boy. Yay,
Oh,
Orson, my
yay.
5th grandchild. So, all right. Well, Doreen, thank you very much for being here and taking your time and telling your story. I appreciate you being on and doing that for us. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of today. I hope you are open minded and willing enough to listen to the message today, even though it might be a little bit different. But the thing is if there's differences, there's always more things alike, I think is what I'm going for there.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look for those, then we will find them.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever we're looking for, we are going to find. Everybody, thank you for being here, for being a part of. I love you all. Peace out and have a day.